All right, so I don't have much time. I got a lot of things to share. But I want to begin with a sort of precursor to my talk that is important for us to sort of like carve out and hash out. And we always have to hash these things out whenever we're having a conversation with folks who are invested in education from different perspectives. To me, being at South by Southwest EDU 5 years ago and then being here today really like speaks a lot to the fact that the general public is so much more engaged in discourse around education than ever before. It is rare that an organization that has intentions or has sort of an origin that's much separated from education has carved out this space and then grown so exponentially. And whenever that happens, you have to understand that you're bringing folks into the fold and into the field that may not necessarily align to the core tenets of those who've been doing this education work for real. And so before we get into the work, I want to make distinctions between the three audiences that we're going to have here today and speak to each of them. So first, I want to speak to our friends, my friends. And my friends are those folks who understand the idea that education is essentially the civil rights issue of our time, that we cannot have conversations about education without talking about equity and diversity, that we can't really call ourselves educators without understanding that our work is not just about teaching, but it's about understanding the social, emotional dynamics of teaching and learning, the culture of young people, psychology, sociology, all melded together in this perfect gumbo that happens when you get into the classroom. So I want to first of all talk to my friends who understand that. And y'all, not everybody in this room understands that. And then secondly, I want to talk to the enemies. And we got to be clear that we have some folks in the building who are enemies. And not enemies because they're inherently bad people, but they're enemies because they come to this conversation at South by Southwest EDU because it's a time for them to be able to pitch their new product or make social connections with folks in certain spaces or talk about their new tech initiative or tech company they're trying to build up or pitch stuff to schools and curriculum. And I'm just saying to you that if that's your sole intention of coming to a gathering of educators, in many ways, I'm gonna have to position you early on as not being exactly where I'm at. So you're sort of an enemy. And then lastly, and perhaps most significantly, I want to talk to the frenemies. And under the frenemies, there are certain distinctions that have to be made there as well. See, there are frenemies who know they're enemies, but come off as friends. And these are the folks who understand all the language. They will cite you some Dewey, cite you some Vygotsky, might throw in a little Piaget for measure shit. They might just bring in a little Paulo Freire, and you're like, ooh, they really about that life. And these folks, when they come through with that kind of representation, you're like, yes, I'm with you, but they have ulterior motives. They're really more the enemies, but understand the discourse of the friends, so they position themselves as frenemies. So we got to watch out for them cats, but they're here. And then there's the other layer of the frenemies, and these are the folks I want to talk to in particular today, right? Which are the folks who actually come to this work with amazing intentions, who really believe in what we said the friends believe in. But by virtue of being a part of systems and institutions and structures that do not value certain populations, they end up being enemies despite the fact that their intentions are good. And today what I want to talk about is how do we engage in a conversion of the frenemies to join the friends, to disperse the enemies from amongst our fold, and reimagine new possibilities for education. And now I can get into my talk. So the title of the talk is, We Got It From Here, Thank You for Your Service. And before I really describe to you why I chose this topic, I have an image under there of the Dinka tribe. And the Dinka tribe is a tribe in Sudan that has a very storied and powerful origin and beginning. Early on in their history, the Dinka actually suffered from an outbreak of sorts of tetanus. And the tetanus caused the young folks to have lockjaw. And what the lockjaw did is it literally slammed the jaws shut. And because the jaws were slammed shut, it was impossible for those young people to get the food and the nutrients that they needed to be able to grow. Who's following me? Okay? And so the tribe had food available, but they couldn't feed their children. So they said, we've got to do something about this. So the only thing they could think about to do something about this was they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have to literally extract out, pull out the teeth of the young people once their teeth are formed. And they would invoke this violence on the young people, ripping out the teeth. But they ripped out the teeth because if they could rip out the teeth from the young people, then you can parse open their lips just a little bit and give them the food that they needed, and they can ingest the food and then be able to survive this outbreak. You guys are following me? So it was necessary for them to be able to do this violent practice on the young people for the sake of ensuring that they got the food that they needed, the nutrients that they needed. And this goes on for generation after generation. And the young folks then learn how to eat, and they can soak in the nutrients that they need. And after a while, what happens is they become strong enough and they overcome the slackjaw. And no longer was a condition that affected their ability to be able to ingest food. However, because it had become ritualized practice to extract out the teeth of the young people from when they were young, even though there was no longer a need to do it because they can open their mouths willingly and take in the food, it had become practice to rip out the teeth. So the folks in certain tribes within the Dinka would continue to rip out the teeth of the young people, not because it was essential, but because it had become tradition. In contemporary education, we follow that exact same model. When we think about the young folks among us who are most marginalized, who have not been able to really sort of partake in this wealth of knowledge that we have around us today, historically, what happened is that we had to rip out their teeth in order for them to learn. The ripping out of the teeth, to me, is the extraction of culture. The extraction of culture has been a necessary component of teaching in America for the sake of allowing young folks to be able to have some food, some knowledge. Y'all with me? And so this goes on for quite a while, and the teeth are getting ripped out, and the equivalent of teeth getting ripped out. You know Brown versus Board of Ed, the forced moving of a young girl into an all-white school. Why do you think the parents sent the kid to that school, knowing she's gonna get spit on and cursed at? Because they knew that that child needed the food of the education she could receive in the other school. I'm weaving this narrative. Y'all gotta stay with me now. All right? So this goes on for a while. And now we are in 2017, and in 2017, information is readily available to young folks who've been marginalized in school. They can go on Google and soak in the information. They can open up their windows, open up their eyes, and just see the world around them and learn. At the time, it was necessary for their culture to be extracted from them, for them to be able to have access to the schools who could give them the appropriate information. And today, the information is all around them, but we are still extracting out their culture in schools. We are still doing the violence the Dinka did on the young folks to get food on young people for getting knowledge in classrooms and schools. We are all collectively complicit in the process of devaluing the natural knowledges of certain young people from certain segments of our population. And that should rattle you. And then I also want to talk about a post-Trayvon stress disorder. A post-Trayvon stress disorder that talks about the fact that over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen black bodies murdered and splattered across social media on a regular basis. And when we go into schools and classrooms, we said we have to focus on content. We can't talk about those emotions. We got to focus on the standards. We can't talk about those emotions. And young folks are carrying those things into the classroom every single day. We're ignoring them. We've become adjusted to the fact that the young folks have trauma. Y'all with me? And keep doing the same old thing, and it has direct implications on their teaching and learning. So we got to get maladjusted enough to be able to help young folks to be able to heal from the traumas imposed by those of us that's in this room. So where do we go from here? MLK asked this question, and I'm going to humbly try to offer some solutions. And I'm going to offer some solutions through Tribe Called Quest's album, We Got It From Here, Thanks for Your Service. Is that all right? Again, I'm using Tribe as my theoretical framework, right? Because no existent framework provides me with enough tools to be able to make full sense of the complexities of urbanness and black and brownness. Y'all with me? So boom. So there's a song on an album called Space Program. On a Space Program, here are a few of the lyrics. They planning for our future, none of us been involved. Then it says, rather see we in a 3x3 structure with many bars, leave us where we are so they can play amongst the stars. That right there is the perception of education by the young folks who've been marginalized in schools. Do I need to deconstruct that for you? I do. Let me do it. Schooling has been framed essentially like a contemporary space program. The most ideal schools are these schools where everything is perfect and high tech. We might have more tech folks in the room than we have educators in the room today. The more you could throw technology at the phenomenon, the perception is that the better it is. And a lot of folks hide under the umbrella of tech without focusing on the core of pedagogy. Let me tell y'all something. You can be in a classroom amongst young folks who have been disenfranchised from teaching and learning. And you may think that you're going to be an equitable educator by providing them with the same resources that a more affluent school has. But if you use those resources in a school where you have not attacked solely the core of the fact that they've been maladjusted to trauma, it's not going to work. And let me tell you what folks do in 2017. When you go into a place and you try to tech away the problem, and the problem doesn't get solved, you start blaming the young people for why they couldn't come out of it with your tech tool. Well, your tech tool ain't focused on the reality of the pedagogy that's necessary for those young people to feel actualized, and so it becomes just a waste. We don't want to teach for the space program. We don't want to teach for souls. We don't want to teach to a common core. We want to teach to a recognition of the fact that we all have uncommon cores. Y'all ain't with me because I'm preaching and y'all ain't really with me. Look, we also have to fully understand the fact that when we're talking about contemporary education, the only way that we can construct new spaces to really be responsive to the ways of knowing and being of young people is to do this miraculous major thing that doesn't cost $1 million, which is engage in conversations with young people. When Tribe says they planning for our future, none of our people involved, that's a reality that's being experienced by young folks in urban spaces. That everybody's making decisions about what we need without engaging us in a conversation about it. And you cannot help somebody, because help is not a new thing. You can't gift somebody something. You could give somebody something and they don't want it. It might have value to you, it has no value to them. And so in my book, I write about cogenerative dialogues. I make the argument that unless we have a concerted effort to engage in critical conversations with wide swaths of the populations who we believe are underperforming, we will not get any solutions. And that's going to require us to get rid of the hubris that comes with degrees and certifications. And shoot, let me tell you something. Don't even worry about your degrees and certifications anymore. The person in charge of education in this country ain't got the degrees you got. Why are you so concerned? The second part about it in that quote is that leave us where we are so they can play amongst the stars. A perception amongst young people that the whole world is setting up for a different economy while they're being left in the places that they're in. Can I talk to y'all this morning? This idea of preparing folks to move amongst the stars is a reality in a contemporary STEM-focused era where everybody want to be so STEM, nobody's doing science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. The phrase has taken on such a meaning that's so different from what its intentions are, that is completely separated from the idea that you want folks to engage in STEM so they could be part of the STEM economy. So you got folks who have coding academies popping up. I throw a quarter, I might hit somebody in this room that has a coding academy that's they're starting up. And this is not anti-coding academy, it's anti the perverse notion that I can go into a community, frame the charity I am giving them as opening up new possibilities for them, when in reality, I still have the low expectations of them, and I'm teaching them how to press a button and watch something jump. I can name it a coding academy, when in reality, you're not treating me or teaching me to engage fully in STEM or the world of computer science. You're teaching and treating me as though I'm part of the lowest totem pole in that new economy. Look, you could, y'all ain't feeling me. You could coding academy your way into creating a new populace that's a worker in the STEM workforce. And how is that any different than creating somebody who's just a worker in the existent workforce? Don't lull me to sleep with the ideas of your charity if your intentions are not to be able to provide me with equity. So the way that we address that is by engaging in a process, not just the dialogue, but the teaching. Are we as educators going to be humble enough to create spaces to allow young people to teach us what we need to do? It's not an arbitrary phenomenon. Because y'all can say, yeah, we're going to make them teach us. But then you get to that classroom and you tell them to shut up. It doesn't work that way. I'm talking about institutions creating spaces to allow young folks to be able to take the helm of the instruction within the institution, to inform the teacher about the nuances of their culture, to be able to tell the teacher, stop ripping out my teeth and just let me be.